Dobro jutro vsem udeležencem 25. andragoškega kolokvija in 3. foruma EPO, tako smo zapisali v programu, EPO o prihodnosti izobraževanja odraslih. Naj najprej dešifriram te čisto začetne informacije. Andragoški kolokvij je vsako leto osrednji strokovni dogodek tednov vseživljenjskega učenja. Ti so se v nedeljo po 5 tednih živahnega dogajanja po vsej Sloveniji zaključili. S tem dogodkom pa dajemo še piko na i. In resnično verjamemo, da s tem tudi prispevamo k stroki izobraževanja odraslih, čemur je kolokvij vedno namenjen. EPO je evropski program za učenje odraslih na temelju te strategije, ki je bila veljavna do leta 2020, ampak se še nadaljuje in prav Slovenija odigrava pomembno vlogo v okviru svojega predsedovanja pri prenovi te strategije. Torej v okviru projekta EPO pa organiziramo 6 forumov, 2 smo že izpeljali, 3. pa je danes pred nami. Še zanimive teme nas čakajo v prihodnosti, tako da bodite pozorni, kadar zopet tale EPO zagledate v katerem od svojih vabil na dogodek. Kot sem že prej povedala, preden ste se vsi priklopili, trenutno nas je že preko 100, prosim, izpišite svoje ime in ustanovo, iz katere prihajate, pustite svoje kamere še kratek čas, minuto, 2 prižgane, zato da lahko naredimo ekranske slike in na ta način sestavimo seznam udeležencev. Prosimo, da tudi izklopite mikrofone, kadar ne sodelujete dejavno. In opozarjam, da snemamo in to snemanje je že v teku, upam, da to nikogar ne moti. Dogodek je plod sodelovanja Andragoškega centra Slovenije z platformo Sloga, ki je torej platforma nevladnih organizacij v Sloveniji, deluje pa seveda Sloga tudi mednarodno in odraz tega bo tudi značilnost današnjega dogodka. In pravzaprav 2 govorca sta prišla iz teh logov, če tako rečem, in to sta mednarodna govorca gospod Rili Lapalainen iz Finske in Kris Milora iz trenutno Filipinov, deluje pa po vsem svetu. In naj vam povem, da sem včeraj zvečer objavila v LinkedInu novico o današnjem dogodku z drsnico in vsem, kar je potrebno, in se tako mimogrede še povezala z govorci današnjega dogodka, med drugim tudi s Krisom. In v svoji informaciji sem pisala, modrovala pravzaprav o zamahu metuljevega krila, ki lahko povzroči tajfun na nekem drugem koncu sveta. In kaj se je zgodilo danes zjutraj ob 5:20, tako nekako. Prva reč, ki sem jo zagledala na svojem telefonu, je bilo sporočilo Krisa Milore, da imajo tajfun na Filipinih in da se žal ne more v živo, tako rekoč v živo, vključiti v današnji dogodek, ampak da je poskrbel za posnetek in ta posnetek bomo kasneje v drugem delu, ki ga bo Patricija, moja sodelavka pri snovanju in izvedbi tega dogodka, predvajala. Toliko o trajnosti, o globalizaciji, o metuljevih krilih in tajfunih, ki so na nek način prispodoba tega, kaj lahko vsak od nas kot posameznik, pa potem večje združbe ljudi storimo, zato da na drugem koncu ali pa na našem koncu sveta ne bo tajfun, ampak kaj bolj prijaznega. Prijazen naj bo tudi ta današnji dogodek in za začetek vabim 2 prijazna sogovornika, o tem sem prepričana na podlagi številnih izkušenj, in sicer direktorico Andragoškega centra Slovenije, dr. Natašo Potočnik, in pa Albina Kevca, direktorja Sloge, k uvodnemu pozdravu. Izvolite.
Zdaj, najbrž ni bilo vprašanje, kako se bova zmenila. Eno lep pozdrav, eno lepo dobro jutro vsem udeležencem. Prav posebej me veseli, da ste se odzvali v takem številu, ker na ta način, kot je rekla Zvonka, tudi malce presenetljivo celo v tem času, vsi kažemo na to, kako pomembno problematiko bomo z današnjim srečanjem pravzaprav z vseh zornih kotov obravnavali. Spoštovani, spoštovane,
Ladies and gentlemen, if these topics will not get enough attention, informally or formal education of adults, this is an important factor. Soon we will no longer have any problems to solve, we will destroy our environment, and all other problems will become enormous. So I welcome this colloquium discussing this topic with a relevant place that should be entered into all strategic documents in strategic. It is extremely important to raise the awareness. We have to be an important stakeholder in all discussions, in all policies on the topic of sustainable development. Until we believe that the problem of sustainability and sustainable development is only undeveloped world, until big industries pollute in the East, this doesn't concern us. And until then, we will have the problem. So truly, NGOs, and I truly thank all the NGOs and especially Sluga platform to be co-host. We are the ones who can reach adults, raise their awareness, and tell them what we all can do to contribute to sustainable development and stopping critical climate change. And therefore, this premise that sustainable development is part of adult education and any kind of education, it should be part of our consciousness. We, all of us, have to be focusing on this, and this is a great opportunity for us to talk how to adapt this learning, this education to individuals, different target groups, but with a common goal in our own ways to reach the goal. But only this is the right path for us to solve, not to sound tragic, but to save what can be saved. So we are truly happy that you have joined us, colleagues, directors of Sluga, and my colleagues as well from the Slovenian Institute for Adult Education. I wish us all a fruitful morning and a lot of ideas how we should continue our work in this direction. Thank you. Thank you. Albin, the floor is yours. The microphone, probably. Microphone, yes. Okay. Greetings from my side as well. Albin Keuc, I come from Sluga platform bringing together NGOs in the field of developmental cooperation and learning in the moment when we all face the complexity of modern challenges. We sometimes think that we received additional knowledge so that we can face these challenges that, as already mentioned, challenge us in the way with their complexity. When we talk about climate change, we talk about fossil fuels, we talk about consumerism, we talk about modern industry, we talk about our way of life, modern way of life that allowed us in the last centuries in different ways to experience a level of welfare, but it's not equally distributed throughout the globe. Through climate change, we face also with huge disparities inequalities in terms of income and access to education as well. And since humanity as such in its history, we don't know anything else than facing challenges. The nature sent us another challenge called COVID-19. So what does it mean to live in modern age when we can communicate globally in a second? The only thing preventing us that is a Philippine typhoon. I hope that everything is okay in Philippines and we can see the video message for this conference. My main message on behalf of the Platforma is that in a way we are happy that we have available all the technologies that allow us to exchange information, skills, allow us to learn between people who hardly meet, who meet in the different. Our organization works in Burkina Faso, Burundi, in African states, and we bring to Slovenia a lot of experience, a lot of lessons how community can work well. The main message that we have when we talk about lifelong learning, when we talk about adult education, everyone working here on this Zoom, in this digital space, we deeply believe that we never stop learning and that we have to transfer means and experience to a number of people, and we all can remember a huge African proverb or saying: if we want to go fast, let's go alone. If we want to go far, let's go together. And this is the way when we combine and bring together skills, knowledge from different areas, like in this event today, I believe it's a huge contribution for us to understand better how the concept of sustainable development operates in our communities. And when with my colleague we talked about what we are doing today, things are very easy and simple. We need personal and community transformation, and this is my call for all of us to listen to all the presentations from today so that we can transfer and bring this to people who are not here with us today. For the end, thank you to Mrs. Zvonka, Patricia, to Slovenian Institute for Adult Education for this opportunity, for this joint creation, and I wish us all a good exchange and a lot of lessons for sustainable future. Thank you. Thank you both for these introductory words, for appeals, for advice, and for the invitation to move forward together. And
Ampak za začetek gremo na globalno raven.
for the beginning, we are moving globally. Let me greet Mr. Rili Lapalainen, coming from Finland. He will join us from Finland, and he works globally throughout the globe for whole his life. He works at the level of policy, profession, practice. He developed into the expert and professional and policy holder in different moments. So he is intertwined with this topic. So it's not an accident that he is co-founder and presiding or the Bridge 47 network, and he will introduce this network in continuation. Really, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very kind invitation, and I'm really happy to be with you, not in physical, unfortunately, but luckily we have this technology which really helps us quite a lot on that. So I'm really, really happy to be here. So thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm just trying to show my screen so that you could follow me a little bit more, hopefully a little bit better. Just for this is the classical situation which happens every time that. Here we go. I hope that you can see that very well now.
It's okay.
Okay, great. So thanks a lot for invitation. And like said, I'm Rilli Lappalainen. I'm the founder and the chair of the Bridge 47. And the Bridge 47 is the global network which we built up for the people who are working with value-based educations. So those people all over the world, including Sloga, dear friends in Slovenia, who really thinks that exactly we can use about the Agenda 2030, the sustainable development, also from the educational perspective. And our focus is in one of those goals, what are really the heart of the SDGs of the Agenda 2030, specifically about the target 4.7, which first time ever in the human history recognize both the lifelong learning, adult education, but all the work what mainly the civil society has done all over the world, hand in hand together with the formal education. So it's some kind of combination of the formal, non-formal, and informal educations, and including the lifelong learning. And I was personally heavily involved on lobbying that target as a part of the SDGs, as a part of the Agenda 2030. And that's why I really believe that that's also the recognition for the great work what the whole civil society has done for hundreds of years. And I think this is very, very important to use that as well, that when we have it as a political frame, but it's also the tool for us to really implement also the things what we believe as educators and learners at the same time. So we have around 1,000 people all over the world. They are representing different kind of actors. They are really the volunteers, they are the individuals who are really passionately working with the peace education, human rights education, environmental education, media education, you name it. There are also a lot of professionals who are working either in the institutions or as researchers or teachers or NGO professionals. There are local authorities, there are politicians, different kind of individuals who really believe that we can learn through the network, but we can also have the common actions what we would like to promote and then make this whole 4.7 more visible and taking this as a tool to really make the change in the world. I think that it's quite a long time. It has been a little bit thinking that yes, let's put the children to the school, and then they are coming out from the school with very equipped for this real life, what is happening out of the home or out of the school system. And that's definitely needed, but it's not the whole story. We need to definitely really understand about the challenges which is happening around us. And that's why I think that this whole 4.7 target as a part of the Agenda 2030, it's a revolution, because it's really understands that definitely the formal education really plays very important role, but also we need to have the other machineries around it. And collectively, I think we can really equip the people to take their own responsibilities and finding the ways how I could be useful in my environment and finding the place what I can do for this whole universe where we are living. So the 4.7, like I said, is this first time recognizing about the all kind of value-based educations. But whole point is really that we are starting from that point of view that we all are learners. None of us are ready and perfect in this life where we are living, but we need to really understand about our capabilities to take this learning aspect and build on the skills what we are having. And this is quite important also in the sense of the United Nations, which anyway has a quite important role to be the platform where the member states comes together, together with the global expertise, really thinking that where we should go on. And I think that, again, thinking about the whole education in the global history, some kind of perspective or the position with the UNESCO, which is in the UN family, the main body promoting about and supporting the education and the culture and many other important points. They have taken approach called a transformative approach to education. And this is quite revolutionary, knowing that not really UNESCO is not perhaps the most modern organization, but I think that they are really taking the very, very big step to really think a little bit differently about how exactly we should work together, so that we are really opening the space for all the actors to take their responsibilities and really thinking how to move on. So exactly, they are talking quite a lot on the shared sense of humanity. They are talking about respect for diversity, and they are talking about solidarity. And this is a little bit interesting situation, because many of us, we can really think about that solidarity is something from the 70s. So it's some kind of old-fashioned word. But nowadays, I was just listening about the United Nations General Assembly a couple of weeks ago, when they have the high week where all the presidents and head of states came together to New York and talk about that. The solidarity is the new fancy word, which exactly many of the member states are talking. The United Nations General Secretary General is using again about the solidarity. And I think that it's absolutely right time to talk about that. If we are really thinking which are the circumstances where we are living in together in globally, we need to have the solidarity. And that comes back to the emotions, that the individual behavior. And it's very, very important one that we start the change from the individual level. And we need to have the full potential of the peoples and feeling and playing as well about the solidarity. So that's really, really important point what I wanted to mention. But from the UNESCO point of view, it's also very important one that there are these aspects keeping on mind when we are talking about this some kind of philosophy, what we would like to put to the back to the ground. Of course, one of the pillars which is needed is the building the peace, because if we are fighting against each other, I think everything is ruined, and we can't really build on. So we need to really finding the ways how we could behave better, not kill each other, building the peace, and where the education is really in the fundamentally important tool on that. And it doesn't really has to be the situation like it is in Afghanistan at the moment, but it's really the building the peace in also in the much more calm situations. Every day we have the examples about the small conflicts happening in our workplaces or inside the families or amongst of friends or whoever. But that's also the building the peace in those societies. And then the next point is the building the just societies, which it really means that we are really taking account about one of the principles from the Agenda 2030, which is the leave no one behind principle, which means that we need to think about from the weakest person point of view about the society, how tolerant, how equal, how peaceful the society is, that the people can really feel also that I'm be heard, I have the opportunities for participate and giving my contribution. And then the third pillar is the building the bridges and social cohesion. And that's been one of our motivation as well from the Bridge 47, is that we need to build the bridges between different actors and building this social cohesion. And really based to that, we can also develop something new which is needed, and collective learning and developing it is much more than what I'm doing as an individual. So this is very, very much in the coming point from the UNESCO point of view. Like all the member states of the UNESCO are also in charge on taking this back to their national realities. And that's been one of the motivation for the Bridge 47 as well, that we wanted to exactly work together with different actors including the member states, civil society, private sector, politicians, researchers, etc. And we have offered the places where the people can come or have been able to come together. And based on the common work together, we have tried to find out about the common solutions, how we can really find some kind of solutions as well, not just saying that the thing is wrong or you should do, somebody else has to do something, but what we can do by us working together and finding the ways and solutions to move on. And let's see if I can show this video, if it will function. It's just about 2 minutes, but let's hope that it will function, because this is one of the example how we operated together and make the Envision 4.7 roadmap, which is the common joint product to implement this 4.7 target in European level. And I hope that we will see that and hear that as well.
In November 2019, experts from across different countries, sectors and backgrounds were brought together by the Bridge 47 network in order to pool their insights and co-create a series of policy recommendations, setting out a pathway for Europe to achieve Sustainable Development Goal Target 4.7 and support the type of transformative education Target 4.7 describes. The Envision 4.7 roadmap was born out of this collective approach. Threaded throughout the document is the belief that we need transformative education to support systemic critical thinking and adapt our ways of relating to each other and the world around us, in order to understand the interrelated and complex nature of the global problems we face, seeing the bigger picture even when it isn't always as it seems, allowing us to rethink and reimagine our way forward. The ability to think in this way is key if Europe is to achieve its educational vision, its green ambitions, and if we are to unlock the chance of a more just and sustainable world for ourselves and others. The 6 different strands of the roadmap lay the foundations for next steps. Their recommendations traverse the need for an inclusive approach between all types of transformative education and emphasize the importance of formal, non-formal and informal education across all ages and stages of life. They outline the value of cross-sectoral cooperation and the kind of competencies or skills needed to deal with uncertain times ahead. The roadmap looks at the resources and resourcing needed to make Target 4.7 a reality, and the indicators to measure and monitor progress. The culmination of years of collective expertise of attendees, of learning and unlearning, the Envision 4.7 roadmap advocates that now is the time to turn the page, to set our ways of thinking, our ways of doing, our ways of being on a different path. Be part of that story.
Very good. So hopefully you could get a little bit some kind of capture on that how we made it. So it was 200 people who came together for the 2 days, and as a part of some kind of collective learning and collective co-creation, we managed to make this is roadmap. And it's focused, like you just heard, about these 6 areas, which we've really found out that they are really the key areas where we really see that the European Union should, when we are mainly so far concentrating on the European Union, that has to have the role to push this aspect. But also we hope that could be some kind of example which could encourage the individual member states as well to take on board about this kind of aspect and this kind of process, so that we should really have a little bit more some kind of wider understanding about the education which is needed in these current times, and implement that in the national level. So as a couple of examples, what I could mention here is for example, in the European Union level, there's a European education area as one of the political priority areas, and then we have really used about this roadmap as some kind of our contribution for the European education area. And so far it really resonates. We have been extremely happy to really recognize that it's really ringing the bell and there's some kind of common interest. So this is one example. Another one is a process about the green competencies. So again, bringing about the global citizenship education skills and these tools what the people are needed, it should be taken account as part of these green competencies. We're also working in the global level, and one of the working areas where we're working on at the moment are the indicators, because all of us, we know that when you're having some kind of plan, you need to measure that somehow. And it has been quite difficult, even in the UNESCO level, to try and find out about the indicators for that. So this is one of the aspects what we are work together with them. But overall, our some kind of one goal is that we still believe that also in the European level, it would be really, really good to have the pan-European strategy for this SDG 4.7 to really recognize exactly this new kind of thinking, that the old style is not anymore enough, but we need to really have a little bit more systematic than more holistic strategy. So where different kind of components are under the same strategy, and then really seeing the need, because I really definitely believe that exactly how the people behaved, it really matters about which kind of policies we are having and which kind of change we need to really have. So we need to have the changes in the individual behavior, and based to that we can really have the changes in the ways of working and then finding the better tools how to move on. But these words, I'm happy to take any comments or questions afterwards, but I would like to thank you again about the kind invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, really. If we were together in a place, there would be loud applause, I'm sure, because you told us many new things, but above all, you confirmed our belief that education is crucial, especially in the field of sustainability. I would also like to say that since we are cooperating with Sloga, it has been some years now, especially in awareness raising processes, we have to translate certain terms to each other sometimes. But Patricia understands us more than we do when it comes to terms like global citizenship education, although we are working on the same topics, only with different names. On the other hand, when it comes to terms that are usually or nowadays being used in policy papers like leaving no one behind, or the new one, resilience, or the new one that you reintroduced to us, like solidarity, I become very cautious, because that maybe means that it will be used when talking about it, but not so much when acting on it. So thank you for really widening our horizon. And I see that some people have raised their hands, and we can take a few questions or comments. Albin,
did I see the right hand up? Albin, did you raise your hand? Yes, I was applauding.
Applause,
so
okay.
applaud.
Albin applauded. Okay. So really, if you can stay with us for another hour or so, it would be very nice, because now we are going to introduce our policy level aspects and also some practice, and the latter is especially interesting for you. Maybe about policy you hear every day, but practice in Slovenia might be similar to the Finnish one or not. Let's see. Okay,
let's move to the introduction of the panel that was recorded, pre-recorded, under the wise management of Nevenka Bogataj, who covers sustainability at our institute, with three policy makers: Dr. Janez Brdaus from the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning, Mrs. Natacha Bucik from the Ministry of Culture. Don't be surprised that we've included culture, and Aleš Oysteršek from the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport. And I hope and believe we also have Tadeja Kvasmajer from the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food. Yes, I can see you. That was invited slightly late, but she kindly responded and will comment the video. And it will be intertwined with examples from the practice as announced before. And thank you to the colleagues from the People's University of Postojna, Ajdovščina and Developmental Center of Postojna. 50 minutes of the program is ready, recorded, and we are talking to you in multisensory way. You could not hear us, but you could read our materials earlier, so you've seen the videos with sound as well. All the materials will be available on our webpage. So we also added Lara Kastelic. She will draw all our discussions and forums in her own way. You can watch her drawings. So let's move on. Guys, let's move and play this panel. And I believe everything runs smoothly. For our local community, as a People's University, we are recognized as the institution promoting sustainable development, which we prove with successful project. I believe that if we wish to encourage sustainable development, it is truly important to include all groups of people, all knowledge that we have, and set interdisciplinary projects. In modern, global, multicultural and aging society, the role of education is important to raise the awareness, to encourage us to use the resources to develop our production in the ways that respond to restrictions of the environment. And we have to emphasize goals, contents and ways of learning that support all three components of sustainable development: ecology, economy and culture and society. We truly believe into the power of cooperation and connection, and planning, realization and management of educational programs should be connected in comprehensive system of innovative cores. And we have to connect them. We have to bring knowledge into new models. It is important to have systematic monitoring and research of good practices, new models looking for social innovation, meaning education with society and for society. Education for sustainable development exceeds studying specific problems. The most important problem is development of identity, critical thinking about values, systems, quality of life, ethical and aesthetic relationship with environment.
Welcome all online participants and of course dear guests at the Slovenian Institute for Adult Education to talk about the green transformation of society. There are representatives of three ministries with us, namely the Ministry of Education, Mr. Aleš Ojsteršek, Director of Educational Development Unit, Ms. Nataša Bucik from the Ministry of Culture, Coordinator of Cultural and Artistic Programs, and Dr. Janez Brdaus, expert and Undersecretary at the Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning. Yes, we are going to talk about time, about duration, speed and pace of adjustment to changes in the environment, including climate change. And therefore, let's start immediately with a question. How long have you been confronted at your ministries with education in its role of adjustment, responding to the environment, and what would you suggest in order to accelerate the response to the changes in the environment through education, of course? If we start at the Ministry of Education, the concept of dealing with the environmental issues was formally adopted in the previous decade, so that this aspect was then created perhaps more evidently and with the aim of true acceleration or a conceptual integration through the adoption of the guidelines for education and training for sustainable development. But otherwise, the environment has all the time been part of the education policy and of the system as such. But when you ask about a faster response, what you probably have in mind is the integration of educational policies and environmental change trends. The Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning will focus more on that. So the climate agreement commitments and everything else related to that. So after 2015-2016, when the Paris Agreement came, the Ministry of Education has had close contacts with the Ministry of the Environment. The relevant experts prepared the first measures for the analysis of policies, and since then we have felt this closeness. What I can also stress in this first part relating to this topic is that as a faster response, I can say that we make sure that the policies are put in place, that we cooperate with other ministries, that we monitor what is going on at the multilateral level in this area, meaning that we have been present all the time at the broadest level in the space and documents of the UN, UNESCO, followed by the European space, where recently the European Commission has announced the first programming document on this topic by the end of this year, and you, the professionals, are the co-creators of that. And then at the national level, which will probably be the topic of the discussion today a bit later, the ministry's role is connecting the key institutes as regards the action plans on environmental topics, addressing education and lifelong learning in particular, and perhaps we will deal with that in more detail later today. And of course, as part of the responsibilities of the ministry, when we talk about the national reform plan, where within the recovery and resilience plan, the education is specifically addressed under the sustainability chapter. It seems to me, therefore, that at the ministry we have focused on this topic sufficiently within our powers, and we also plan to support the actions taken by our agents, institutions, schools, professionals, and adult education centers. Maybe so much from me at this stage. Thank you very much. What about you at the Ministry of Culture? Perhaps the colleagues should be given the floor first. Maybe we'll give the floor to the Ministry of the Environment as the last in this round. So, please, the floor is yours. The Ministry of Culture, together with cultural institutions that it finances, has responded, of course, throughout that period to current social change and also to sustainable development. Cultural institutions from all areas prepare various cultural programs relating to diverse topics connected with sustainable development, including climate change, currently being more in our focus. As regards sustainable development, we cover the broadest spectrum, from equal opportunities to migration crisis and the like. On the one hand, the ministry finances or co-finances the development of such cultural programs, while at the same time, in cooperation with the Ministry of Education and the National Education Institute, we have taken care a number of years of professional training of staff in the area of culture as well as education and training, so that they bring these programs closer to children. Our idea is that when you bring closer to a child or an adult a specific topic through some cultural content, which, for example, can be a book, a fiction, a show, you address them differently than if you introduce to them a theoretical material. These approaches have proven to be more efficient on the basis of specific cultural contents. Young people think more critically about such topics. Since 2006, we've cooperated very intensely with the Ministry of Education in this respect, not only as regards the programs, but also the activities to improve even more the understanding and acceptance of such cultural content. We put a specifically high emphasis on professional training and at the same time also on co-financing the projects to bring them directly to the users. As regards professional training, our largest project here is Cultural Bazaar, where every year we prepare the topics to connect different ministries. And when Alesh mentioned when it all started, we opened up the sustainable development topic as early as 2012. Later, we also dealt with other topics related to individual aspects of sustainable development. 2 years ago, for example, equal opportunities, then water was discussed as a topic. In addition to that, we also support the professionals in education through different materials that we produce. As regards sustainable development, last year, a selection of theater performances was made, for example, concerning the sustainable development challenges. Let me mention that on the 12th of October there will be the first night performance at the Mladinsko Theatre of the show titled Heat, touching upon the climate crisis. A performance that will most certainly deal with such issues. In the same way, selections of high-quality literature are made, both fiction and handbooks and literature for various target groups, that is from preschool children to adults. Let me mention as an example the books written by Lučka Kajfež-Bogataj that are certainly important also for the education process. Then, in the field of movies, the selection always includes high-quality films, theater performances, also exhibitions, since we also collect such information. Let me mention in this respect films by Matej Franic, Birds of the Lakes and Wild Slovenia, two films as examples of encouraging young and adults to think about the environment in which we live. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to the representative of the Ministry of the Environment. Hello, I would like to say first of all that my historical memory at the Ministry of the Environment is much too short to know when the Ministry started dealing with education and training in this respect. Many people have worked here, and I continue the work of my predecessors. And the main challenge is to really to reach the objective set, and if we manage to do that, I'm sure we will make a significant progress in this field. The plans are ambitious, and currently we are in the phase of their implementation. Obviously, the emphasis in our work is on climate change, both mitigation and adjustment to climate change. And we have two main programs or projects here. The first project is Life Care for Climate. At our ministry, we also try to combine to the maximum possible extent different financing sources, and we are partly funded from the EU funds, the LIFE program, partly also from the Climate Fund. Two main tasks of this project, Care for Climate, are, on the one hand, to raise environmental and climate awareness among the general public. We are not working only in the field of education, but also in awareness raising. We carry out awareness raising campaigns also in the media. The second main objective, even more relevant for this discussion, is identification of skill gaps. Here, we have primarily in mind people in the world of work, in the broader sense, both in private and public sectors, also in agriculture, in entrepreneurship. So this project contains a program comprising a set of trainings, mostly dedicated to employees or self-employed, also to managers. The fact is that the transition to a low-carbon society will bring about new technologies, new materials, new organizational models. Or, to put it simply, this will be a considerable social change and will impact both our day-to-day and professional lives. The training has been designed in energy efficiency, renewables, green technologies. They are addressed to municipalities, municipal officials, then in transport, local energy concepts. We also train public officials in green public procurement. The transition to a low-carbon society will also result in a change in a lot of legislation, regulations, and here as well, the staff should be appropriately trained. Then training in waste, food, etc., in the field of agriculture as well. So we try to fill the gaps identified already in the operational program on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions years ago, and now in the new National Energy and Climate Plan. The second major program, currently in the phase of development, in cooperation with the Ministry of Education and public institutions from the field of education, is the measure relating to climate content in education and training, financed from the Climate Fund. We would actually finance the work of public institutes, including the host, the Slovenian Adult Education Center, as well as the National Education Institute, the Institute for Vocational Education and Training, and a Center for Curricular and Extracurricular Activities. Our intention is to really strengthen climate and similar content in the entire field of education and training for sustainable development along the entire vertical, from kindergartens to high education institutions. Higher education, however, is covered by the Care for Climate project, so that these two programs complement each other, and we practically cover both formal and informal education by these two programs. Thank you very much to all three of you. As a matter of fact, all of you highlighted the management role, which in 2018 in an OECD study was also specifically mentioned. The pace of environmental change is growing, and probably it is difficult to adjust the management of large systems such as ministries, along with all institutions or institutes, to such an accelerated pace of change. Given the Global Agenda 2030 with these 17 objectives, we can be quite happy with what has been achieved. But as you mentioned, Mr. Berdaus, strengthen specific content and seek synergies between these objectives is probably the challenge we are all facing, both you as well as institutes, people on the ground, we all in Slovenia. We are happy to see that you are satisfied with what you've done. Mr. Oystershek, you highlighted the integrity of the systemic response. The guidelines were adopted in 2007. We are now in 2021. And our question is how to accelerate this response, how to achieve synergies in a large system, and to stress new needs, contents. Some days ago, Ljubljana was flooded, and there were large wildfires in Greece. We are not used to such extreme phenomena at our doorstep. How can a large system really respond through education and training? Thank you for this excellent question. It touches upon all of us and most of the fields in life. The education policy makers work also intensely with school management, the principals, and when we monitor their educational concepts, this is maybe the easiest way to explain how. Professionals have suggested the dispersed management system, meaning a transition from an autocrat and know-it-all to strengthening competencies, team building, moving ahead together. I'm sure that the education policy is on this route, and that these results will be a consequence of first understanding the concept of collaborative learning, in addition to everything else that we call critical thinking and networking, and last but not least, lifelong learning. And the development strategy of Slovenia contributes to that significantly. This is one of the objectives. This means that it is impossible to expect in regular education period that an individual will understand everything necessary. We are transitioning to the concept of being permanently in the education system, and that we respond critically. This is why the sustainable development concept should be understood broadly, that we are also talking about global learning, where we need an active citizen who understands what it means to live in a democratic society, and that the things, once they are put on the agenda, cannot be simply ignored as unimportant, because in the past the system allowed it. Now, if something is put on the agenda, it should be understood as a challenge, especially if analytical data lies behind. And when we talk about climate change, this is the case. And we are certain that the dialogue ahead of us will result in a different decision-making culture, accepting the transition to solutions, because they will not be easy. The folk wisdom says that it is easier to move a cemetery than change the curriculum, and you wouldn't believe that it still holds. There are societies proving the breakthrough, that a breakthrough is possible by means of a dialogue, and they are a kind of beacons elsewhere, not in Slovenia. And I believe that all of us, through this discussion, this roundtable, we can contribute to that. This means looking at such challenges and environmental issues from other perspectives. I would like to mention here, in particular, active citizens who should take a critical approach to serious challenges, and it is here where we see the answers. And I also mentioned that knowledge is there, it should only be connected. I expect that such approaches will very soon result in major breakthroughs. Thank you very much, Ms. Bucik. Maybe the fact that they are rooted in our legacy, where the generations of our grandfathers and grandmothers had to adapt both to changes in the nature and the changes in the society. Maybe our legacy may provide a strong support to us on the way described by Mr. Oystershik. Yes, that's true. This is what we have emphasized for some time now, and maybe before, when the colleague mentioned food waste, and this year in particular, when Slovenia is the European region of gastronomy and the emphasis is on food, on healthy food, we know that in the past, no food produced at home was thrown away. Farmers knew how to use everything. Today, a lot of food is discarded. An apple should look beautiful when you eat it, etc. And everything that is bad goes to waste bins. It was different in the past, and we wish to raise awareness among children and adults through our legacy. As regards education, it seems very important to me that these things start early in the childhood, that it is truly lifelong learning, as you said, where the generations are interconnected. And if we succeed and achieve the intergeneration transition, these things are even stronger. The practice shows that often children change the mindsets of parents or grandparents, or encourage them to change. This is also important. Contemporary art also responds to all this, and seeking common roots here is very important. Also, in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and in the documents subsequently adopted, the emphasis is on the importance of working together. It seems to me that we look at the development only in our field and don't see the other part. We live our lives comprehensively. we don't live it by areas. I'm not dealing now with water and the next minute with something in education. Rather, I try to connect these things, and in this way we wish and try to connect also culture and include it in various topics. I know that the circle here today is limited, but as regards this topic, when we work, we cooperate closely with the colleagues from the Ministry of Health and the National Public Health Institute, with the colleagues from agriculture and food. To put it simply, we try to deal with things as comprehensively as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Verdaus. I think that's the government and its development policies already have some tools for a quick response to changing circumstances and new challenges. Part of public funding in different activities go through public tenders whose programming documents are mostly not very limiting. They define the areas of funding, but not what exactly needs to be done. Project ideas, of course, come from the ground, and such a method of funding and managing the implementation of development policies allows that different projects are applied for to try to address the new challenges. In this way, policy makers can attract new ideas and initiatives according to the bottom-up principle. Therefore, I wouldn't say I worry that we would remain in the past, deal with problems that no longer exist. I think that we have the necessary mechanisms. This does not mean, of course, that it wouldn't be useful to reinforce their implementation. Thank you very much.
Adult training actually deals with different things. We actually can take part in different projects from different ministries. So I can say that we are dispersed through different areas. Definitely, it makes sense what we also try to introduce in our municipality, in our region as well, with other municipality in Primorska region. We try to introduce a green-colored program that would raise awareness of people and also practically guide them into being green. We have to start by knowing the fact that people don't change overnight. Their green thinking will not happen overnight. So here we have to proceed gradually. Now we have 2 communities, next year 4, and then at the end I hope all 10 will be included. In our municipality we offer a lot. It depends on the program that we offer. We don't have multi-annual financing from our founder, but we've designed the program in the way that it can be upgraded and we can apply to different tenders. Why? Adult education is priority. We have to keep this in mind. There are not 50 of us. There is 10 and 12 or 20 of us. And this is the challenge. How we can find our place in different resolutions or programs. Now we have an ideal opportunity when we are preparing the operational program for current financial perspective to additionally recognize people's universities, to see us as a modern educational center.
Let's move to the next question, to the last round of our discussion. What is the role of adult training in responding to climate change, new forms of management? I'm grateful, Mr. Oysterschik, that you mentioned the importance of lifelong learning. For decades, it has been clear to us that conflicts are a normal part of building up a community and responding to changes, even though they bother us all. How can adult training contribute to a faster response, to be more flexible in view of all of these ever faster and ever more extreme changes? For example, if we think of the damage on enormous surfaces in Notranska, and it is impossible to protect ourselves from such a phenomenon directly through training. We respond very quickly to an extreme situation, but we are slow responding to soft changes. And perhaps adult training, which is already dispersed, which is used to intergenerational learning, is entering the digital transformation already, and now also green transformation, and it has the initiatives mentioned by Mr. Berdaus. How do you see adult learning in the coming years and its role? Adult training policy is facing many challenges. The key challenge is the adult participation rate, and here it seems to me that we as a society lack a breakthrough. The lifelong learning concept isn't something truly broadly present in the society. This gap between those taking part in adult training and those lagging behind somewhat is the key challenge to ensure, to be addressed in order to ensure that the change takes place as quickly as possible by seeking appropriate answers. What is the key element to contribute that the lifelong learning concept becomes omnipresent, which is not the case now, as the rate is really low, and then through that achieve key change. And as both colleagues said, the fact is that the society will change when we will live differently. And to be able to live differently, the concepts will have to be internalized. We don't only say that we need to know something about it, but also that we live differently. Some will be forced to use other fuels, other approaches to mobility, but somewhere this will be delayed at the level of society, and as individuals we will either participate through less food waste or think how to solve it in another way, or we will not. Lifelong learning constitutes a key challenge to the field of education. The relevant documents open it up, but we don't know whether it will be enough to increase the investments or do something else. And when I read the documents, what is evident is inefficiency, that we as the society do not manage to address the measures to reach a breakthrough. Everything else, as regards the importance of education, does not need to be highlighted here. Education is certainly a crucial element of every society in the transfer of knowledge, change, development of people, if we talk about it as the basic part of education so much. Thank you very much. Another sub-question for all of you. There are probably many young people with us online, and they are the ones who will be affected when we retire by the consequences of our decisions and mistakes, and those from the past as well. And in 2019, the Youth for Climate Justice made a request or an initiative about what to include in terms of content in adult training. Maybe you can say something about that. The the response by politicians to the challenge that there is no planet B will be crucial. Either we will constitute the change, because otherwise we will lose credibility of being teachers to young generations until they're grown up. So I think the response by all of us is this message, whether we are the change here and now, and how we will read and respond, or else we will lose the integrity and also the concept will fall of education as we know it, namely first as an element of knowledge transfer for the needs of some operations that the state needed in the early period until today. Thank you. Yes. What I find interesting is that the young respond and that they are critical, are motivated for what is different, even though it is usually extracurricular. I attended today a panel discussion on motivation at the Educational Development Unit, and it is interesting how low the motivation for learning is for school subjects, while at the same time we see that the young are more engaged in some other fields, and it is important that we build on that we bring specific content closer to them, that they can be critical and that they can bring our attention to the fact that they want to be present and take part in decision making. In culture too, we try to increase the engagement of the youth, also children, using mentorship approaches and to teach them such approaches. A short question also for you. Through decades, our original organizational models have got lost. Since we are a relatively young country, maybe the Ministry of Culture in this respect could show to the youth, for example, that in 6,000 settlements in Slovenia, which are dispersed, small, this community action is alive. But of course it is not part of the education system. Maybe here a synergy between education and culture is possible. We are really doing our best to penetrate through the formal and informal education system also to local communities. In many local communities, cultural institutions, professional or amateur, are very active and very integrating. There are many cultural societies, also within youth centers, where the field of culture is also present and where they respond to these things. The ministry can provide guidance, and this is what we are trying to do also in the new national program for culture. These topics are paid additional attention, but we can only succeed if we work together. It is impossible for culture on its own. The Ministry of the Environment and Spatial Planning on its own, but also a truly common approach is necessary. This seems crucial to me. From the national level to the local, this means a bottom-up and a top-down approach together, and for the young people together with them. Yes, young people are our future, and it seems in this context that one of the challenges is to increase the share of those, not only among the young, but also among adults who are engaged, who are prepared for change. The transition to a more sustainable society will require, as mentioned earlier, the cooperation of all of us, the citizens. different experience in different societies due to this corona crisis that has not been brought to an end shows a different level of cohesion, readiness for action. Some individuals are more or less willing to act, and others who defend the daily routine. And here, I think, we have some challenges, more or less directly relating to the challenges mentioned earlier by Mr. Oystersen. The more there are motivated people among us for active participation in change in the society, the higher the interest in education, not only compulsory education, to some extent, such as secondary higher, but also adult training, requiring some sacrifice. So we need to sacrifice some time and effort, and we need motivation for that. The last 2 years have shown that we are facing specific challenges in Slovenia. A suggestion or sub-question also to you, Mr. Birdaus, and then we'll wrap up our discussion. In adult training, we are used to pay special attention and care to vulnerable groups, less included, perhaps less educated, socially and economically weaker, while in the environment, though, there are more and more vulnerable, injured ecosystems. How can the Ministry of the Environment extend a hand to the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Education, in converging the care for vulnerable ecosystems, for example, wetlands protected by the Ramsar Convention for adults, to take care through training of such vulnerable landscapes? The view of us dealing in environmental protection is a bit specific in that the most environmental damage, to put it roughly, is caused by the least vulnerable social groups. More vulnerable social groups are those that suffer the consequences the most. Our duty certainly is to deal with more vulnerable social groups, and as far as the nature is concerned, the ecosystems, climate, as victims of our action, our role definitely is to transmit the right information, what it is that can really help the environment, what kind of knowledge we need, what skills, what we need to do differently, because it is not all the same. In view of the complexity of the task, it is important to focus on the fields with a higher effect, and of course, according to our abilities, we can contribute something also through financial means, and this is also what we are doing through the inclusion in the programs of the European funding and the financing from the Climate Fund. Here we are already active. Thank you all for a socially responsible discussion, and now all online participants are invited to raise questions, make initiatives, and to show an active response to climate change.
Lahko bi rekla, da je izobraževanje odraslih bolj podpornik, bom rekla, vsem tem razvoju potrajnostnih načelih in prispodobo bi lahko izpostavila Posoški razvojni center. Navsezadnje z našim povezovanjem in sodelovanjem, bom rekla, sodelavcev iz različnih organizacijskih enot, tako Kmetijske univerze, okolja in podeželja, skupaj s
space, rural area, we combine the puzzle, and without interconnection and true cooperation, this story definitely could not bear so many rich fruits. We would expect from decision maker a more comprehensive and systemic approach, true connection, cooperation between different actors and levels. We would expect that we would be an intellectual razor blend with common intellectual challenges, with planned resources to avoid such a big gap. Practitioners are here, willing, with their enthusiasm, ready to step into the action, move. And we are looking for opportunities, possibilities with our interconnectivity in the field, in local environments, so that we can bring this so-called, or overcome these so-called financial gaps, if we wish to make this green story a breakthrough. And it cannot stand on individual projects only.
Prisrčna hvala vsem
Sincere
nastopajočim.
thank you to all
Sama
the
sem bila navdušena
participants.
že v
I
petek, ko
loved
smo panel
our
posneli,
piece
in
on Friday
kasneje,
when
ko
we've
je
made the
Darjan prišel s
recording, and
terena
later
in
on
prinesel vse te
when we
posnetke.
got the recordings from the
Pazite,
field
to
as
so
well.
samo teaserji,
Pay
v bistvu na
attention,
nek
these
način
are all the
pokušine,
teasers,
kratki posnetki
samples,
iz
short
daljših, te pa bomo
experts
predstavili na letnem
from
posvetu o
longer
izobraževanju
pieces
odraslih,
that
kjer
will be
bo
introduced in
trajnostna
our annual
problematika prav
conference
tako
on
na
adult
programu in predstavljeni
education
bodo v
with
virtualni
sustainable
stojnici,
topic
ki jo
as
poznamo
well,
že iz
presented
lanskega
in our
posveta.
virtual
Vabilo
stand that
seveda
we already
sledi
know
kmalu.
from last year
Zdaj pa morda
conference.
še samo
You
beseda
will
o tem,
soon
da
get the
je v
invitations.
chatu, v
And now in the
klepetalnici tudi
last
potekalo
comment we had
kar
a
živahno
chat,
dogajanje, in
lively
sicer
chat
Nataša,
happening.
Nevenka sta z
Natasha,
nami delili
Nevenka
nekaj virov.
shared some
Nekateri
resources,
bolj politično
some more
zasnovani viri,
politically
strategije, o katerih je
designed
bil tudi govor, so
resources,
tudi na spletni
strategies are
strani že
also available
objavljeni.
on
Bomo
our
pa dodali
webpage,
zdaj še
and
te
we will also
bolj
add
kulturnega
these cultural
področja vire in pa tudi znamenja
resources
trajnosti, na
and
katere je
the
opozorila
signs of
Nevenka.
sustainability that
Potem je
Nevenka
bilo
mentioned.
povedano, Tanja,
Then
hvala,
what we
veliko
heard, Tanya, thank
je
you. A lot
izraženih
was
besed, veliko dobre volje, ampak
expressed
vendarle
words,
konkretizacija vsega tega,
but
in
we
mislim,
need
da se bomo
specific
počasi
action.
temu bližali, ko
Yes,
se bo
we are getting
dogodek še
there. And I hope
razvijal.
that this event
Bi
will
pa v tem trenutku
develop
povabila
further.
prej
At this
napovedano
moment, I would
sogovornico, gospo
invite
Tadejo
previously
Kvas-Majer iz Ministrstva
mentioned
za kmetijstvo. Na
colleague
kratko rečeno,
Tadeja
nimamo več
Kvas-Majer
prav
from
veliko
the
časa,
Ministry of
ampak
Agriculture,
izvolite
briefly, but
k
still,
besedi.
the floor is yours.
Hvala lepa za
Thank you
povabilo
for
in lep pozdrav
inviting
tudi
me
v
and
mojem imenu.
greetings on my
Moram reči, da
part.
sem z
I
zanimanjem
have to say
poslušala
that it was very
sogovornike
interesting for
okrogle
me
mize.
to listen to
Vmes
the
sem si
round
določene
table.
misli zapisala.
I wrote some thoughts
Ne
down.
bom odgovarjala na
I
vsa
will not
vprašanja, ki so
answer
bila tudi
to
njim
all the
postavljena,
questions
ampak
that
mogoče
were
na
asked
kratko.
of them,
Moje
but just
mnenje je, da
briefly, my
izobražujemo se
opinion is
pravzaprav
that
od
we are
rojstva
learning
naprej pa do
from
smrti,
our birth
zavestno
till
ali
the death,
nezavestno.
consciously or
Seveda je to
unconsciously.
izobraževanje odraslih,
And
ki je
the adult
organizirano
education
toliko
that is
kvalitetnejše, ampak če
organized
hodimo
is
po svetu
that more
odprtih
quality, but
oči
if we
in
walk
uma, se
around
sproti
with our
učimo tudi
open eyes
nezavestno.
and minds, we learn
Povzemaš tiste
subconsciously,
dobre
unconsciously.
situacije iz
You
okolice,
see
v kateri
good
se gibaš.
situations in the environment that you move
Kar bi
through.
želela povedati,
What I want
to,
to
da v bistvu
say
to, kar so
is
naši
that
predniki
what
in to,
our
kar smo, kar mi
ancestors
oziroma
and what
delamo,
we
zato
do
da
now
danes govorimo
to
več
be
o
able to
trajnostnem, se
talk
pravi, smo
more
mi
about
naredili tisto
sustainability
škodo
means that
na
we
okolju
caused the
in žal je
damage
tako,
in
da
the
se družba
environment. And
začne
unfortunately,
premikati
the
nazaj
society
k
starts
naravi,
to
k tistemu,
change
kar
and
je že
move back to nature,
začela
to what we
uničevati
started
družba
to
oziroma naši
destroy.
predniki.
What our
Dostikrat je to
ancestors
tudi že
started to
prepozno.
destroy,
Zato je
oftentimes
ključno,
it's way
da
too
se
late.
naučimo
So
oziroma
it's
zdaj imamo
crucial to
priložnost, ker
learn
vidimo,
now.
kakšne
We have the
težave smo
opportunity when we
povzročili
see
mi,
what problems
da
we have
naše
caused
otroke naučimo to,
to
da si
teach our
ne
children
bodo naredili
not
škode.
to
In prej je bilo
cause
lepo
more
povedano,
damage.
And it was said quite nicely, young people are quite active and there are critical mirrors, if I may use this term, and we know when we are happy to see our image in the mirror. It is important to listen to the young people. We see the bad image that we want to avoid in the mirror. They warn us about the damage caused, what we have done, that we have to shift directions and to change ourselves. That's the hardest thing. At the moment, I work on the strategy to reduce food waste. It was mentioned today, and the strategy is ready. It will be open to interministerial consultations, and I'm happy that I've joined you in the moment. I found the fact that I failed to address the adult education. We've mentioned young people's education, but not adult education. So I'm happy to take a note that we have to include that as well in our strategy. Our society works in compartmentalized. Each ministry needs their own strategy, but we've heard that we need to work together. Strategies that are crucial, critical, burning strategies should be included in existent strategy, and the ministries should be not egoistic but open, using the rough language by saying egoistical, but we should consider the impulses from other ministries and try to introduce those messages in our existing strategies and change society, our habits, and so on. Interconnectivity, listening to each other, looking at each other, learning from each other, that is the key, and following the examples of good practice. Excellent, thank you. You've added the last piece to what we've heard. We've born an alliance of 4 ministries. We usually include up to 9 or 14 ministries to our discussions. And yes, rough, but through what you've said, we have to know each other and see where we can meet to reach the synergies for better results. Now, we are exact at the time of our break. So, are there any of the panelists or listeners online? Do you want to add something? I don't see everyone. If you might help me. Are there any raised hands? No. So we all need a 15 minutes break. Let me thank you all for your participation, for everything that has happened. And let's move into the second part. We've moved into the green. That was the title of our section. In the second section, we will discuss the Plan B up to the end to our valuable guest, Boštjan Videmšek, will discuss his book with the same title and something more as well. So see you back at 11:45. Thank you all. See you soon in 15 minutes.
Tako, dobrodošli nazaj, se bomo kar pošilcersko držali naše ure.
Every minute counts, and welcome to the second part of the green transformation of society, the future of adult training. So I'm Patricia Virtić, I come from Platforma Sloga, and together with the Slovenian Institute for Adult Education, we have organized this conference, and I look forward to meeting different people and coming across different projects. So there, when we are faced with challenges, we often forget that the solutions are there too. There are many promises on the paper. What about practice? The first speaker in the second session will talk about the connections between lifelong learning, sustainable development challenges, green transformation of the society. And he is this is Chris Milora, author of the project Bridge 47, and we have heard something about Chris today. Chris Milora comes from the Philippines. He is a researcher who has recently received his PhD on learning on social transformation in East Anglia in the UK. His research interests focused on the training of young and adult, and he has sent a message to me during the night and mentioned the typhoon in Philippines, and he actually recorded his contribution at the home of his friend, and let's listen to him.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you very much to our friend Sloga for inviting me today for this very important and also very timely event. I had wanted to join you live online, but unfortunately, there is currently a typhoon, a strong typhoon that is hitting the north of the Philippines. And the area where I currently live, I'm currently based in the Philippines. So the area where I currently live in central Philippines, this is not the center of the typhoon, but we are experiencing very strong winds today and might run the risk of internet and power interruptions. So I did not want to risk it. So I decided to just record my presentation rather than not being able to present it all. But I think the situation where I am today, it's quite representative, I think, of one of the many issues in living in a country like the Philippines because of climate change, the kind of issues that we face because of climate change. While though most of the world's carbon footprint is concentrated in more developed nations, countries like the Philippines are bearing the brunt of the climate emergency. So for example, on average, my country experiences about 20 tropical cyclones every single year. And we are located in what is called the Pacific Ring of Fire, where we experience earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc. So these natural disasters, as they call it, means lives lost, schools closed, sources of livelihoods damaged for many families. And in the education sector, this meant that schools are being converted into evacuation centers, and teachers and students are being forced to brave strong floods and strong winds just to get to school, or even to cancel school altogether. So the Philippines, of course, is just a microcosm of how the world is literally on fire at the moment and could also be underwater. Many communities around the world are under extreme weather conditions or climate change conditions, and this has not stopped because of the global pandemic. In fact, the world is battling both this acute health crisis that the pandemic that we've been dealing with for the past couple of years, but also this more long-term issue of the climate emergency. And for me, for the education sector, and lifelong learning advocates who are with us here in the Zoom room today, this meant the need to look into not only how climate change is impacting education, but also how education, and specifically adult education, and lifelong learning can be an agent of change in responding to the climate emergency. So let me just share my screen now. just to show you my intervention for today. So really, my intervention for today looks at lifelong learning and environmental education from a global perspective. So my intervention today focuses on that very idea. How can lifelong learning, particularly approaches to environmental education and literacy among adults, can enable us to shape a greener but also a much more safer future? And to do that, I'll be drawing from case study examples of programs in Canada, Indonesia, Botswana, and Siberia. But first, let's talk about lifelong learning. Now, there are two definitions here of lifelong learning on the screen today. The first one is lifelong learning is all learning activity undertaken throughout life with the aim of improving knowledge, skills, and competences within a personal, civic, social, and/or employment-related perspective. What is interesting in this European Commission definition is that it has very strong focus on knowledge and skills, right? That we are always being upskilled as individuals throughout life. However, what this definition also tells us that learning does not only happen in schools, it could happen all throughout life and all across different spaces. So we can learn not only in school.
V kontekst podpornega učenja, ki temelji na realnih situacijah, odprtih in
their households. And I think environmental education is the same. It's not only educating people within the classroom, especially adults who are not able to access education opportunities, but also being able to look for different learning opportunities across different spaces in life. However, I'd like to offer another definition here by Fisher. And I think what Fisher tries to encourage us is to look at lifelong learning at a much more wider perspective. Fisher says lifelong learning includes training approaches, but also transcends them by supporting learning in the context of realistic, open-ended, and ill-defined problems. So for Fisher, it's not only about learning the skills for the job market, it's also about learning to be able to work together, right? Learning to be more aware of the social issues like the climate change that people are facing and how are we going to address them. So this increased awareness, critical awareness, but also this ability to work with other people is also another important aspect of lifelong learning. And that really leads me to the links between lifelong learning and the climate emergency. Environmental education could happen significantly in informal and non-formal spaces, as I've said earlier. But there's this issue that a lot of environmental education programs have often been targeted towards children and young people, which I think is a little bit a missed opportunity. And I will talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But lifelong learning in the context of the climate emergency also encourages people to draw from indigenous and local knowledge and practices towards environmental resilience. Remember that lifelong learning, we all know this, lifelong learning encourages us to look at different forms of knowledge that the school and the formal institutions or the university is not the only source of knowledge. There are so many other spaces, and included in that are indigenous people's knowledge, particularly within environmental resilience. But why do we need to engage adults in environmental literacy? These are some of the reasons. First, I think in the most important, and I would like to focus on this a little bit, is the idea of intergenerational learning. That it's really important that in attacking the climate emergency and being able to solve it, we need to think about not only children learning or young people learning, but also adults learning, because everyone has to have their share in terms of, in environmental, instigating environmental change. But also it is about us learning from each other, or different generations learning from each other. What, for example, the Fridays for the Future has encouraged us to do is to make people accountable, to make adults accountable, young people making adults accountable for their actions, like in the third point here below. Adults must change if the environmental education of children is to have credibility. right? So it's not only all the time that the children are learning from adults that we need to teach them. Actually, we are learning so much from them and from their activism and from their passion in this particular area. So it's for environmental literacy and for environmental education, it's really about bringing as many people together in this particular fight. Now, let me go through some of the interesting examples around the world that perhaps we can learn from in terms of being able to respond to the climate crisis. The first case study that I found to be interesting is the intergenerational landed learning program that is being conducted in British Columbia in Canada. What they do is they actually bring together a group of students and a group of community elders who are retired farmers to explore the values of environmental concern and care for the land and engage in an intergenerational learning process. So here we are seeing intergenerational learning in action. We are seeing how outside school, this is in a garden setting, environmental setting, young people are learning from retired farmers on how to grow plants, etc. But also the retired farmers are learning from these kids on new technologies, different ways and of engaging in different forms or different channels of communication. It promotes garden-based intergenerational collaboration and hands-on learning. To teach about and promote environmental stewardship, healthy diets, lifestyle, and development. What is interesting about this program is, adults are learning and the kids are learning from adults, vice versa. But they also foster a better collaboration and a very important collaboration between different stakeholders in the society, right? It involves a broad spectrum of organizations that influence environmental education and action messages across different parts of the city. So this is a very good example of what we can do if many different generations are working together towards the climate, towards understanding the environment and to become better actors towards the environment. Now, that's Canada. And now let's move on over to Southeast Asia and Indonesia. So this is the case study of the Jayagiri Center in Indonesia, which is actually a winner of the UNESCO Japan Prize. It's a laureate for this prize by UNESCO on education for sustainable development, because it's a very good example of the problem-solving power of education for sustainable development, which has not only reduced the number of school dropouts for children, but also solving social, economic, and environmental problems of rural residents and the urban poor through its support of smaller organizations. So what they actually did is they built a center which was open to young people, but also adults, free of charge. And in this particular organization, the learners come from small farming communities who made the living planting vegetables, but the land on the land owned by a state company near the village. So when the government imposed a ban on horticultural farming in the foothills to prevent the landslides, which occurred during monsoon season, then all these families suddenly lost their livelihoods. So what this particular program does is it provides training programs, especially available for women and young people, and it has led to more sustainable businesses. And they were able to produce an institution for early childhood and non-formal and informal education under the Ministry of National Education and Culture of Indonesia, right? So, and until today, the project is still ongoing. So the family, families that are part of this program are now able to earn 2 to 3 million Indonesian rupiah, around 140 to 210 euros per month, which is about twice the minimum age of workers in Banda, Indonesia. So it offers a lot of benefits across different stakeholders, this particular program. It was about saving the environment, the sustainable farming and horticulture, using education and lifelong learning as a key approach, but it also leads to better livelihoods and bettering the lives of women and community members in the area. This one, the case study from Botswana, describes a collaborative effort to integrate environmental and sustainability education into teacher education at the college experiencing water scarcity. So this is particularly in Molly-Pololi College of Education in Botswana. So what they did actually is that they were able to establish a site for teaching natural and social sciences to student teachers. So they developed this area where they can teach student teachers, so those who are becoming teachers, about natural environment by being in the actual environment itself. It's also a multidisciplinary and teaching and learning resources. There is an on-site wetland and rainwater, greywater harvesting systems, indigenous trees, shrubs, and plants that were all installed and supported by water conservation measures, while serving as resources for, to support teaching, learning, and research among student teachers. So what this project is actually doing is it's trying to develop the next generation of teachers. Again, a very different perspective in lifelong learning, by engaging them in environmental education, by being more hands-on, rather than just teaching them from books or inside the classroom. What is very interesting about this particular project is it was able to establish this new teaching and learning research opportunities. The student teachers were empowered by these opportunities to plan, implement, and monitor their own projects within this particular organization or particular space. So it was a very consultative approach, right? And offering assistance, which were valuable in initiating the project. So again, this is another approach of doing environmental education outside schooling. And the final example that I have is an environmental education fund, Uvas Mitut, or in English, it means home of the northern people in Siberia. So this is an environmental education program at an ethnic camp, which enables visitors to become familiar with the ecological wisdom of the indigenous peoples of Western Siberia, of Russia. This program illustrates how indigenous communities can participate in the global agenda as actors, suggesting their responses to global environmental challenges. What is very interesting here is you're exposing people, visitors, and the local community into an environmental program, an environmental learning program that is very much tightly linked with the indigenous practices of these indigenous peoples. So developing a responsible attitude towards nature and social cultural objects can be done, or it's being done in this particular organization, a particular approach. So it was about developing learning activities. So it's developing better attitudes through learning activities about the traditional way of life and the use of natural resources of indigenous peoples in this particular community. They created this camp in 2017, and what it does is it demonstrates the importance of human-nature relationship for the indigenous peoples of the North. It emphasizes the role of animals, of plants, of landscape, of climate, and the natural phenomenon in the mindset and economic life of the local community, the Khanty, Mansi, and Nenets. And it's also about familiarizing the visitors with nature-aligned technologies of the indigenous people of the North. So what they're doing here is that they're taking wisdom from indigenous peoples and using that wisdom and providing a learning opportunity for people to learn from this wisdom and perhaps apply it in their own contexts, right? So it's very important for these social interactions to happen in these different spaces. And that, I think, is the strength of this particular program. So what are we learning from all these case studies from around the world? And I think these are some of the policy recommendations that I'd like to present today, but also this is coming from the research that I've done from Bridge 47, which I think Riley has explained earlier in the day. I had the opportunity to conduct research for them, and these are some of the policy recommendations that we were looking at. And this is also coming from the learning from the case studies. The first thing is that environmental education policies should acknowledge that learning occurs in all stages of life in various forms and spaces. So it's not only learning in schools, it's also learning in indigenous communities, such as in Siberia. It's also learning in gardens, such as in the case studies in Canada, in horticulture, such as in Indonesia. Number two, policymakers need to ensure that lifelong learning and transformative education is made a priority at the national, regional, and global levels. There has to be a policy support for these particular programs to be able to have an enabling environment for them to be able to achieve their goals. So it's not only about supporting them through resources, but also having the policy framework within which they could contribute towards. And lifelong learning could be positioned as a policy approach to education that cuts across and brings together various SDGs. And this is what we're learning, right? It's not only about environmental education per se, it's not only about quality education per se, it's also about the care of land, one of the SDGs. It's also about gender empowerment or gender equality, such as in the case study of Indonesia. It is also about quality education, such as in the case study of Botswana, right? We're developing student teachers. It's about the SDG on partnership, which is very important across all of the case studies. Some people say that lifelong learning and adult learning actually is the invisible glue that holds the SDGs together. And finally, it's very important that we think of marginalized communities not only as recipients of lifelong learning programs or in environmental learning programs, but as stakeholders that could help shape these policies. What can we learn from the experiences of indigenous peoples, of women, of older people? How can we learn from them instead of just thinking of them as recipients of our learning programs? What can we learn from them so we can develop more responsive programs? Okay, so I think I'll leave it here. And as you can probably see, it's a very complex issue, climate change. But I think when we work together and we do not leave adults behind, right, then we can have this very intergenerational approach to responding to climate change crisis, unlocking the power of education in the process. Again, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm sorry I can't be with you live, but many greetings from the Philippines, and hope you have a good rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
We came back to Slovenia. We are sending good wishes to the other side of the world, and thank you, Chris, for your words that have encouraged some new ideas, some new thought.
No, idej, kako odraslim, pravzaprav pa kar vsem generacijam
about adult education, the question is what means to live green. So let me greet Natasha Jazvinšek, head of the Department for the Protection of the Environment at the City Municipality of Ljubljana. Greetings. We hear birds singing how Ljubljana was a green capital of Europe, tackling that job quite actively. There were a number of activities with that introduced with that title, and a lot of them have survived till this day. So, Natasha, can you tell us more, please? Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share some of our experience from the municipality of Ljubljana in the so-called of green transformation of society, in the fact how in daily life, in reaching these ambitious environmental goals, how we can take care of education. So we are well aware that reaching these important goals that are ahead of us in the future city itself, it's not enough. We need to cooperate with different stakeholders and active participation of our citizens as well. So we put a lot of effort to these issues. Cities are drivers of change. Also today, 3/4 of all people who live in cities, and until 2050, 85% of people will live in cities, meaning that cities produce most emissions. Today, we have 70% of green gas emissions occurring from the cities, and these emissions are growing with traffic, with transport. Energy users in the city use 65% of global energy. So cities are the key to reach our ambitious goals. Of course, as we already heard, cities cannot become environmentally responsible on their own unless we introduce measures that would be followed by NGOs, individuals, different organizations, economy, and so forth. And this is being confirmed daily. Going back to 2007, when City Municipality of Ljubljana designed the vision Ljubljana until 2025, what is the direction of the development? I should mention the key pillars of this vision. We said that Ljubljana would first take care for the citizens and visitors to live high-quality lives, that the Slovenian capital would be a modern city, respectful of its history, developing its properties of capital, and taking care of all natural benefits that we have to make the city with highest quality of life. One of the points that we put into the vision was we will encourage cooperation with our citizens, and this is what we wish to promote through all the projects and activities. In the last 15 years, we have organized over 2,000 different projects, all focused on improved quality of life, sustainable, environmentally friendly, and all these projects have led us to truly important title of Green Capital of Europe. The vision that we've designed in 2007, that was set for the period until 2025, has already been implemented. So in this year, we are designing the new vision, Ljubljana until 2045, focused on key goal of strategic development, Ljubljana carbon neutral capital. And the main developmental guidelines are innovativeness, resilience, and recognized identity, and city of knowledge and cooperation. And in continuation, let me introduce a number of cases how we try to bring this to practice in our daily life and work. If we put some of the attention to raising awareness, informing, educating different stakeholders, I can say that this area experienced a breakthrough in 2016 when we got the title of Green Capital of Europe. At that time, we established the so-called info point at the city house, at the city town hall, and we shared our knowledge with different stakeholders. And at this info point, the green info point that you can see on the photo, 2 green containers, we've implemented the program on educational programs, zero carbon programs. We've included economy, societies, NGOs, university, primary schools, kindergartens, and our citizens as well. Together, we've organized and covered 365 days with round tables, workshops, discussions, everything with the purpose to inform people why green capital, what does it mean, what measures can help environment, what are the measures for the future, how we can co-create this green story of environmental and climate responsibility. To sum up briefly, that year we've got over 600 different events organized at that point, with together over 300 partners, 34,000 visitors, and a number of events throughout the city. Outside of this info point, we've included all primary school pupils and kindergarten children, students in high school and at the university. And I can say that that year, 2016, made a boom, a breakthrough in this green story, that practically at the end of the year, when we surveyed the citizens, 97% of those knew that Ljubljana was a green capital, knew why and how we became the green capital, and what are our goals for the future. It was truly important that everyone takes part, that feels part of the story, and that is how we all can introduce changes in our own lives, so that at the end we can reach this zero carbon, zero emission footprint. Another recognized example is the example of invasive foreign plants, and we are faced with these foreign plants that can cause economic damage. Then they have adverse effects on indigenous plants, and a number of them are alien to our environment. 10 years ago, people knew and have never heard about ambrosia or Japanese plants. And that is why we started this project quite systematically, in light of attracting citizens to take part in this project, all stakeholders to work together and reach the knowledge about this alien knotweed, Japanese knotweed, and other alien plant species. We started in 2015 when we connected with a number of NGOs, with university, and we realized or see what can we do. If before, in the area where we saw a lot of damage occurring when we removed these plants physically with huge financial costs, we made a breakthrough in our heads and saw what we can do. We were among the first in the world that managed to make paper from this Japanese wheat, and produce paper bags and a number of other products, not just put it on our wasteland. There were a lot of volunteer working hours invested, removing these weeds. We informed people how these plants look, how they spread through surfaces, and what we can do with them. And this initiative was quite successful and encouraged us to continue with such practices. We started with the project Applause. We gained European funds and we focused on 27 most frequent alien plant species. We established, together with different partners, mostly with professional institutions who have a lot of knowledge from this area, and we established what can be done with these plants. Can we establish or can we find a business model, economic model, to use these plants for useful purposes, for useful products as raw materials perhaps, and prevent the development of their spread. Also here we focused on including different stakeholders, our people, our citizens, and we've followed the principle do it yourself, process with us, and bring to the collection point. We've introduced a number of educational activities, workshops that we organized due to COVID-19. A number of activities were modified. We prepared a lot of material online, and we taught people how to recognize these plants, what they can do with such plants. We've established we organized 2 online workshops, paper making workshop, and we invited people to take part in workshops organized by our municipal company Snaga, and we prepared all the directions, guidelines, how they can do it on their own, and how together with us they can create, train further, learn more, and recognize these plants in nature, and how they can bring them into our collection centers. There were a lot of activities implemented, a lot of workshops, a lot of video materials. For better recognition of these plants, we prepared 3D models as well, so we taught people why alien invasive plants are so harmful, and after the completion of the project, we asked people, citizens, how aware are they about this area, what they know about it. We were quite surprised how efficient our initiative was, how people know how they can recognize these plants, what they can do, what they can recognize. And there is another example, the efficient cooperation. In Ljubljana, for a number of years, we are working hard to establish the best conditions for locally produced food, to increase our self-sufficiency. So systematically we are building the network of gardens throughout the city. There are a number of designated areas where our citizens can rent their plot of land and produce their own food. We decided this is not enough. It's not enough just to manage this area of gardens. We wished to equip them and teach people how to garden, to be as ecologically friendly as possible. Our goal is for these gardens to be eco-friendly, for people to know what are the skills that they can refer to their friends, to their family members. So the goal is for the self-sufficiency in Ljubljana to be eco-friendly, to be organic. So we are organizing learning gardens where throughout the growing season we have professionals present who are teaching gardeners where to plant, what is organic gardening, how to crop rotate, and a number of other skills in connection to organic farming. And today we have over 1,000 growers who have good environmental awareness and good knowledge about organic farming. Just briefly, a few words about some other projects that are quite close to my heart and are founded on the fact that we introduce young people, we raise them into active citizens who are willing to change, who are willing to work together. Project Outside is a project that in this year runs for the third year in a row. We are wrapping it up, but we will continue also in the future. The fact is that we try to encourage in our local environment for people to recognize how their proximity and nature can be improved, how new content can be brought into their life, how they can interconnect and what they can do on their own. So City Municipality of Ljubljana, together with our mentors, prepares a tender, a call, where different local communities can apply with different initiatives, how to improve their environment, the environment of the blocks, of how they can make the environment better, how they can grow some plants, some sports facilities, anything that they wish to make. There were a lot of local initiatives that we've supported financially and professionally, and it is important for people to take part in their initiative, that they get to know each other, and when the project is finished, they take care of what was developed. So people are more aware and more included into these initiatives. So this is the initiative that we wish to continue also in the future. Another very simple but truly interesting and efficient project that we called the field, in the area where on deserted area. Specifically, we're talking about the area that was during the time of establishment. It was intended for further construction. This was a pit, an abolished pit, construction ground, and we introduced the project The Field. With young people, they built the ground for experimentation, for different Zooms, for different activities with the topic of circular economy. All the materials were reused, were found at the Snaga grounds, and they reused it in this area in different workshops. And here we got a ground for active participation of young people with their proposals, with their ideas. and so forth. And the last example, Livada, where we again included NGOs and open the space for them, some green surfaces with creative city green surfaces where young people again spread good practice with they take care of the meadow, they manage the surface, they give birth to new idea, take care of self-sufficiency, and we provide not only space but take part in professional way. And Livada is the space where NGOs have opened the space for the activation of young people. I could go on and on, talking a lot about such projects. We work a lot in raising awareness, education, mostly young people. Young people are the ones who will build our future. And I believe that we are on the good path. Young people are later on those who take care that actually we can reach our ambitious goals that we set as the city, and together with all these activities they are becoming active partner. They are ready and willing to take part in all the initiatives, and they are the source of good in cooperation, and wherever possible we try to introduce them.
Thank you, Ms. Natasha, for these interesting examples. Now let's move on. We've heard that learning doesn't take place only in classrooms, either in primary school, secondary school, or higher education. So learning takes place everywhere, either under the bridge, outdoors, through the Zoom, or even in during a show in a circus. And Matea from the Sloga platform will tell us more about a circus and climate change. Why have you chosen such an approach, which is slightly strange? So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Climate of Change project, and I'll focus on this circus as an example of an interesting practice on raising awareness. It's a strange combination, but it makes sense. So now something about Climate of Change. It is funded by the European Commission under the DEAR program. It's the Education and Raising Awareness on Development, and also the Ministry of External Affairs is involved here. There are 16 partners from 13 countries, and our aim is to raise awareness among Europeans and their critical understanding of migrations caused by climate change. So it is focused on climate change as a cause, then climate justice, and some other issues. We also try to actually activate the people, and it is divided into 4 pillars. The first are reports and publications on which the messages of the campaign are based. At the end of December, we expect the report from the fields and the description of the situation in countries such as Guatemala, Senegal, Cambodia, and Kenya. So Kenya instead of Ethiopia, because the researchers couldn't go to Ethiopia. So how the researchers understand the climate change and the migration. We have also issued a report on the economy of welfare as our response to the current economy leading to disaster and climate change. Also a climate guide, which is available in English. In 1 month, it will also be available in Slovenian. We also developed some other materials, and all this has been integrated into the education and raising awareness through discussions, through workshops. And so these are the activities on global learning, including debates as a specific skill that the participants acquire. And these activities take place in secondary schools and for the age group from 19 to 25. And anybody interested in that can contact us. We also organize other events, the workshops for young instructors and decision makers. Our external communication is integrated into the Pan-European campaign started in April this year, both online and live. So we take part at festivals next year at the European level. We'll organize workshops, and in Slovenia we will invite to Slovenia the speakers from Bologna. We wish that they share their experience. And this circus performance is an example of innovative praxis. But before that, I would quickly like to talk about the results of the survey carried out by Ipsos in the EU member states. 20,000 young people were involved to see how young Europeans understand the relationship between climate change and migration. And here you can see the data on Slovenia, and we can see that youth are very much concerned about the consequences of climate change, and what they mentioned is environmental degradation, poverty, and famine. So the young are informed on these issues via TV, social networks, and informative web pages. So they don't mention schools at such a top rank. So this survey shows that understanding of the climate change issues and migration is not at the level we would wish, and that the information is not obtained primarily through the education system. So we can see that there is a need to increase the knowledge and to raise awareness, and the formal education system should contribute to that, and informal learning also plays a key role, and all other forms of education. And this climate of change project focused mainly on the youth. We shouldn't forget the importance of a comprehensive approach, a global component. We need to make sure that the education is transformative, inclusive, inclusive and that both young and adults are included. So it is transformative and actually connects different generations. So this performance is performed by Magda Clan Circo and Circus School Schola. So there are 8 countries involved. It will take place 5 months and it will end in a month. So the circus, the tour stopped in Slovenia, in Nova Gorica at the beginning of August, and that was part of their project of the European Capital of Culture. Also the accompanying program has been organized, taking place mostly outdoors, on the streets, and our partner at the local level was involved. So I would also like to talk about a workshop making graffitis using the moss, so that it is successful on the wall. We not only acquired new skills, we also can produce work of art locally. In our case, unfortunately, we weren't very successful because of the heat wave in Nova Gorica, 38 degrees Celsius, so the moss couldn't grow. But this is another story then. Change the hairstyle, change your mindset. That it took place 2 days, in the morning and in the afternoon, and actually people could get free of charge a haircut and understand the social consequences of climate change. We used sound stories explaining what is going on and why, and also there was a discussion on what we can do, but the central point was the contemporary circus performance on 2 evenings about climate change and of all its consequences, the floods, melting of thermal frost and other stories. What we wish is to include the wider public into the story, showing them that our actions have an impact on the entire world. More than 1,700 people saw that performance, and we were also there with stands to inform people. The interest was high all the time, and also this performance was also interesting for the media. The reactions of people were very positive, and the structure of the viewers was different, young and old, local people, also from Italy, because it's on the border with Italy. So this approach, this program, this performance is actually at the crossroads between art and fight for the environment. And through this, so we come across this approach more and more frequently. We heard earlier about the performance by the Mladinsko Theatre, so social issues, arts, and this approach is innovative because from the transfer of data and information regarded by many as not interesting to a change in mindset. So through awareness raising, new experience, individuals are actually guided to thinking about what we can do as active citizens. After 6 performances, we actually obtained a sample to analyze how successful such an approach is, and also we obtained the feedback from all our partners and the visitors' reaction. So the feedback shows that most of the visitors liked the performance, and also the majority of the visitors replied that the performance didn't actually reach the target of raising awareness. It is logical because such a performance can't deal in more detail all the issues. So we'll try to get more feedback, and this is what we are currently doing. And all the partners actually realized that the visitors were both young and old, and that the adult visitors actually expressed a lot of interest, and they talked about the content, that is the consequences of climate change, and this external communication plays here a crucial role. Actually, we need to put emphasis on this awareness-raising component of the performance. This is perhaps not the best type of art, but this communication in advance is crucial. So what we do also through such a performance is to channel these issues to the wider public. So here we have the climate of change vision, which is integrated into the whole campaign and the petition that was launched in Nova Gorica together with the performers to call the European Union to develop policies to achieve the climate neutrality by 2030, that to move away from the existing economy to the economy which is environmentally friendly, that we actually provide support to countries affected by climate change and also the migration, and that the young are actually involved and engaged, and that they take part in decision making. It is important that our voice is heard, and to conclude, we don't want the content of the performance and the performance only for the visitors that could see it. So all the partners are now developing video reports and other deliverables, and in November, when it ends its way in Brussels, it will be available to the broader public, and the creators of this performance will actually get all the rights because we wish that it continues to be shown. And at the end of this tour, we'll produce a short video film. So we wish to collect a lot of information and material, and a lot is already available also through the partners channels, and I invite you all to watch it because it is really interesting.
Thank you, Mateja, for these very interesting examples how you were making a circus around the climate change, and this is necessary if we want to alleviate the consequences of climate change.
Besede niso dovolj, akcije so potrebne, kaj ne?
Words are not enough. We need action. And action is what we will listen about to Boštjan Videnček, the ambassador of the European Climate Pact. He is a long-term journalist, reporter from crisis areas, and in recent years he started focusing on renewable energy sources and alleviation of climate change. He is traveling globally to learn about the well-functioning good examples. Boštjan, hello. We are looking forward to your thoughts about what we've discussed today, how adult education can impact the green transformation of society. Hello, everyone. I hope that after this long morning you do have some attention. Zoom is not the best platform to hang out together when you talk about going from words to action. What Chris has said and what Mateja has mentioned is so inspirational that I created new examples for my future research. But since we are wrapping up, let me simply start with a brief introduction. Since for 25 years I've been reporting from war zones. And since the majority of these wars, those that started after 2001, after 9/11, are still ongoing, there are eternal wars, so-called. Personally and professionally, I got frustrated, traumatized, helpless, because working locally, regionally, and globally in case of war zone reporting became not irrelevant, but without a tangible impact and effects. That you need to be mildly crazy to do the reporting from war zones. You need a lack of fear, and everything disappeared with my age. So after 2013, after Middle Eastern war and after Darfur, I noticed there's something new going on. New is not the best term, but still, conflicts are driven by something else. These are no longer classic wars between the two countries. They are becoming asymmetrical in case of migration as well. And one of the main drivers are climate change and radical consequences in spaces that I reported from. And here and now, now the majority of conflicts, armed conflicts, are happening in arid, dry, hot spaces. This is in reverse. This is Sahara, North Africa, Middle East. These are the conflict area, and since I could not change anything with my reporting from these endless wars, with my photographer Matjaž Krivic, 5 years ago we decided to change the course of our work. The majority of wars, we recorded what was going on, and we started on the path of constructive journalism that no longer records the consequences, but interprets and based on experience and the presence on the field and self-reflection, focuses not only to educate the public but also to political players, decision makers, offer some solutions, some manuals with guidelines. In time of dispersed attention, in time where we live in the dictatorship of asocial media, where our work, a large part of social sciences are becoming obsolete based on total idiotism, it's difficult to be competitive. And despite of the opened option for public discourse, it's still very difficult to be efficient. And for more experienced, engaged people who have access, energy, and ideals, I truly believe that we need an imperative not only to ask questions, just describing the consequences, but we should offer answers and solutions. And in the light of everything mentioned, Matjaž and I journeyed the world, focused on Plan B. This is not only a book, but an open project that we continue. And we started to look for well-functioning, not science fiction examples, but well-functioning examples, good practices, how we can face climate crisis, that we see as the key front line, not only for humanity, but something that carries the core of conflicts, core of everything that we are. And that is why we tackle it with similar methods as we dealt with war stories, based on presence in the field, looking for cause and effect, and looking for an algorithm for common denominators. And after everything I've heard today, I want to bring together those most important thoughts, but very rarely detected thoughts when we discuss climate change, crisis, and combat with climate change. The best examples, the best cases, it's the result of our research, but might be different. But best results in fighting climate change can be found where consequences are extremely strong, where people had no choice, but they had to face the climate change, not wait for authorities, not wait for invisible hand of the market or the industry, but people had to make their own solutions. And this I understand in the context of the opinion of Daniel Kahneman, great US psychologist, who said that climate change should be faced in the sense that a person, humanity, is not evolutionary equipped to face the combat that is not imminent, that is not present, and environments, Middle Europe is not facing huge temperatures, high waters, so we respond slowly, too slow. And when you have final threat, ultimative threat, not abstract but facing you, like the truck that you that is running towards you. So it's very, very difficult to respond in case of non-imminent threat. Climate crisis as such, we should not respond with reflex response, but we should be seriously responding. This is the imminent threat and facing the imminent threat. Secondly, according to our journey, our results, second common denominator are well-functioning communities. Some well-functioning social tissue without strongly established hierarchies, where with more or less consensus they could reach rapid solutions, where there is not a lot of bureaucracies, where there is not ultimative power of lawyers, of the law. And the third common denominator is the necessity, the emergency, and some business talents applying for tenders without any shame. There is a lot of money for green projects, available funding for green projects. And we will still have to pay the debt, but now this is a historical opportunity for funding that we should not neglect. In US, there is a momentum, strong momentum, and you should use it for just right causes to promote green transition. There is a lot of opportunities that people who are fighting for status quo can get this funding. Fourth common denominator, fourth line, is that without some natural leaders, without some driving force in the community, nothing can happen. In every story of success, in the first 11 chapters of our book, we found people who, on behalf of the community, on behalf of the whole class, were willing to step forward and not think just about themselves as a consequence. And using this personal leadership in all the examples that we found and mentioned, the clearest example and the closest example emotionally and geographically closest is the example of the first self-sufficient island in Mediterranean island, Telos. In spring 2019, they became self-sufficient, energy self-sufficient, depending on solar power. And when I mentioned before the funding available outside and how Spanish finances can be hijacked, the technology can be hijacked as well.
bi rekel, uničujoči tok naših življenj, ne? To ne pomeni, da bi ustavili, ampak zgolj umirili podnebne spremembe,
we
ki same po sebi so
cannot
nezaustavljive, tega se
stop
moramo jasno
but
zavedati.
alleviate
Ne igrajo, bi
climate
rekel,
emergency, climate change,
božje vloge,
the
ne.
stream of change.
Če je tam zunaj samo tehnologija, je to vedno
We
prazna
only
školjka,
have
ki jo lahko
technology
napolni
out there.
kdorkoli, ne.
This is an empty shell that can be filled by anyone, and technology hijacked by technocrats can change into different kind of weapon without any social role. And Telos is the example, like some other good practice example, but the Telos is a case study of the decade where first the change happened in paradigm, in the thinking, in the cultural thinking. This island was in 1970 was a demographic social catastrophe. The fascist authorities were in charge, and Dr. Tassos Aliperis, after the fall of this government, could return, the doctor could return to the island and was invited to help a new President Papandreou, and he was asked where he wants to serve. And doctor decided, send me somewhere no one else wants to go, as a last choice, as the last place anyone wants to go. And Tassos went to Telos, and the rest is history. He came to the island where old people lived in majority. As a doctor with surgical precision, he started planning the development at the end of 1970s. He started developing new paradigm, new values. And after renovation of antique roads, after they've introduced the first same-sex marriage, and when the island decided to be an exclusive tourist destination for quiet, limited groups of tourists, when the island decided to be self-sufficient in food as well, things started changing. Young people started coming back, and the island became recognized, and energy needs started to grow. They had underwater power lines, and they were running on coal and diesel, on thermal power plant. So why you would need a thermal power plant on Mediterranean island? It is a horrible, a horrific paradox why you would build something like that. So due to energy needs, a classic opportunistic approach was to start thinking about energy self-sufficiency, to find not sufficient but excess renewable energy sources. So, by the accident, I truly believe it was no accident. It corresponded to my first visit to the island in 2017. It was after the peak of the so-called crisis, where migrant crisis, where
nizkobegunske
The
krize.
European Union never before experienced the refugee crisis, but
Tilos je tudi tam deloval,
Telos
kako naj rečem,
operated
samoposkrbno,
at that
povsem
time
ločeno od
as self-sufficient,
grida, od ustaljenih poti,
distant from the
samosvoje,
grid, from the
samolastniško, in
existent
je ljudi,
pathways,
ki jih je na otok naplavljalo,
and people
begunce,
who
ki so prihajali
were
s čolni
brought
iz
to the
bližnje Turčije,
island
Tilos nikoli ni bil
from
na njihovih zemljevidih,
Greece
pač pa drugi otoki, tisti, ki so
on
prišli,
their
ki jih je
refugee
dobesedno
boats.
vrglo na Tilos,
Telos
so
was
bili
never on
v
the
bistvu
map of
begunci, so bili še v bistveno
refugees.
slabšem psihofizičnem
Those
stanju,
who
kot ljudje,
crashed
ki so
on the
prihajali na druge
island, people
otoke,
were
ki so bili
even were in worse
Na
conditions
Tilosu
than
so
other refugees.
so te ljudi
And on
sprejeli
Telos,
kot, ja,
people,
ljudi,
these
kot
people,
soljudi,
these
ne, ne kot
migrants
grožnjo,
were
ne kot nekoga
received
drugega, neko
not as a
praktično,
threat, but as humans,
sovražno vojsko, kot je to počela
not
Evropska unija, ki
as
počne iz dneva v dan
an
stopnjujoče
enemy
se
army
reforme,
like the
rasističnem,
rest of the
ksenofobnem in
European
šovinističnem,
Union,
tonu in
expressing
politiki
their
še vedno,
racist,
ne.
chauvinist
Te ljudje so po par
undertone.
dneh,
These
dobili
people,
službe na
after
otoku,
few
turizmu, v gostinstvu
days
in tako
on
naprej,
the
tudi drugje.
island,
Številni
were
otroci
employed,
so bili
finding
tukaj
their work
v
in
šolah,
tourism,
našli
in
so
children
arabske
were
učitelje med begunci in
introduced
tako
to the
naprej. V
schools.
bistvu
They found
samo ena
Arab
beseda, ki je
teachers
odmevala
between
povsod in
refugees,
odmevalo
and there were
mislim, da
one
Tilos še danes
word
dostojanstvo,
echoing
Taka res
around
radikalna
the
oblika
island
feminizma,
was
ki se mi zdi
dignity.
rešitev za vse ključne
And this is the solution for
rešitev
every
stvari,
key
ne.
problem.
In dolga leta sem se
So
ukvarjal
for
pač
years I've
konflikt,
been
popolnem
dealing
procesu,
with
da
the
tudi z
conflict
begunskimi
from
migrantskimi zgodbami,
war
obšel vse
zones,
mogoče
with
poti fizično, ne.
migrant and refugee
In
stories
na
as
Tilosu se
well.
odpravil
So in
pogledat
Telos,
primer,
I
recimo,
went
te
to see
pozitivne
what
prakse.
is
In ko
the
sem delal to
example of
zgodbo, ne, sem
positive
naletel
practice.
seveda tudi
And
takrat
when
z
I
Matjažem
was
že
writing
raziskovala
this
primere pozitivne
story
prakse,
with
spopada s
Matjaž, we were
podnebno
looking
krizo, po
for
svetu sem
good
naredil tudi
practices
zgodbo
of
prvega
facing climate
samopreskrbnega
change.
otoka.
So
In sta se te dve
we
zgodbe
started
preklopili.
developing the story of the
In
first
kar hočem izpostaviti je,
self-sufficient
da pač,
island. What I
ob
want to
nekem
mention
da je že
here
obstajala
is that we
sprememba socialne
already
paradigme,
had
da je
the
obstajala
new social
pripravljenost na
paradigm,
spremembe,
the
da je obstajala
readiness for
skupnost, da so
change,
obstajali
the community,
posamezniki, ki so do
individuals
kasneje nasledili,
who have
ki
followed
so zgodbo svojo in namesto, da
with
svojo
the
potegnili
story,
naprej, ne.
with
In
their
na
own
drugi strani je pa
contribution to the
obstajal seveda
story.
poslovni
And on
trend
the
in
other
tehnologija,
side,
ki
we
se
had
s pomočjo
business talent and
grških univerz,
technology
nemških
that,
znanstvenikov
with the
in
help of
evropskega
German scientists,
denarja
with the
pomagali razviti in
European
spomladi
funding
2019
and Greek
se priključili s
institutes,
svojo
they
sustainable zeleno energijo.
introduced their
Danes, ne,
green,
je
sustainable
Tilos, bi
energy
rekel, še
approach.
toliko bolj
Today,
uspešen in
Telos
spomladi
is
naslednje
even
leto bo
more
tudi
successful.
postal tudi
In
prvi
spring
otok
next year, it will become
Mediteranu, v
the
Sredozemlju,
first
kjer
Mediterranean
bo
island
veljala
with
zero waste policy in ne bo
zero
ene kante za smeti
waste
ali pa enega
policy,
kuglišča
no
smetišča,
waste
recimo,
bin.
ne. In to se mi zdi, glede na to,
So,
da je mali otok, da niti
since
slučajno ni
this is a very
da nima
small
nobenih,
island,
kako bi
they have
rekel,
no
neverjetnih specifik, a ne, recimo, ne vem, pač
special features,
geotermalna energija na
unimaginable
Balkanski Islandiji,
features,
recimo, ali pa
no
izrazito
thermal
veter,
energy like Iceland, but
plimovanje in visoki valovi na tistih
high
otokih, ki so pa
tides,
seveda idealni za proizvodnjo
extremely
pomorske
high
energije, a
tides
ne.
that are
Tokrat pozabljene
important
energije
for
prihodnosti, to je res naslednja velika
the
stvar.
production
Je Tilos
of
tukaj
the
zdaj
energy
primerljiv
of
s
the
celotnim
future,
Sredozemljem in
tidal
še več
energy. And
aplikabilen,
Telos is
mogoče
here
ga
an
stopnjo
applicable
praktično res
example.
vse, praktično brez
They
izjeme
practically
vse
have
mediteranske otoke,
everything
seveda ne
without
otoke, ne.
exception.
In v svoji aplikabilnosti je
And
postal
in
tudi prepoznaven
its
in zaradi tega
applicability
predvsem
became
gradili svoje energetske
recognized,
projekte, ne.
receiving
In ne, to
awards
ni
for
znanstvena
their energy
fantastika, da,
project.
to je
This
delujoča
is no
sprememba, ne.
science fiction.
In mogoče se z
And
opisovanjem Tilosa že
perhaps
ponavljam, ampak se mi zdi,
I
da v
am
bistvu
repeating
je
myself
nujno, ne,
by
da
describing
v
their
tej
innovativeness,
neki
but it is
alienaciji
truly
javnosti, no,
important that in
še
the
posebej je
alienation of
monokromnost, monokromatika ene same teme, ne, korona krize
the public,
zadnjega leta in pol, v bistvu
in
pozornost
the
preusmerila, ne.
monochromatic attention of
je
our
že težji
last
k javnosti,
year, we
ki je
should
tesnobna,
shift our attention from anxiety and closed public, from anemic and less sensitive for what is going on in the world. We have to develop
do drugega, ne,
we
drugače,
have
še bolj
developed
intenzivno.
our aversion, intense aversion
Ker se
for
prvič
different and for the other,
koronavirusa
where
noben
for
izmed
the
ljudi ne
first
razume,
time
kako se
in
ta
the
to se dogaja.
history we see
Samo nam,
ourselves
tudi meni,
as the
Bog
center
kako
of the
dražno,
world
ne.
within this corona
Je,
crisis. the question of climate change is even more difficult to communicate in public, to raise the awareness and engagement of the public. And so here and now we have to offer the response to catastrophic scenarios. I'm not talking that we need to hold back or lie, but we have to present it here and now. Without specific solutions here and now that are offered to politicians, businessmen, business leaders, and wider society, wider audience, wider public, there is no breakthrough. So here I want to mention Michael Mann and his last book, Climate Wars. This is not a literal title of the book, where Mann emphasizes what I try to emphasize myself all the time. At the presentation of the book, oftentimes I get the question that makes me quite nervous. That happened in wars as well. What can I, as a citizen, do? As a person, what can I do?
So when I say it out loud, it makes me angry. Here, I'm not here to take care of the movements of individuals, but this is a catch, a big catch, a dangerous catch. If the attention, I'm talking about the context of Michael Mann, if the attention or the weight about tackling climate change is actually passes on to individuals, such as, for example, in tobacco wars and soft drinks. Any individual, whoever he or she is, finds themselves in a major crisis, and it's too much to be able to sustain that, and then the potential of an active citizen is lost, and people become passive citizens. And what is the consequence of that is the concern of climate emergency. And those emitting or producing emissions continue to do their activity, and without a change in consumer habits, we will not be able to pay ourselves out for the climate sins. So climate emergency has no limits. It doesn't know the families. It is so dangerous that only the whole community can fight it. The easiest way is to use the existing model to fight climate crisis. It has, of course, its negative sentiments and to describe tragedies through them. But this war, this conflict, this key civilization fight or battle is so serious that we, of course, can't seek any alliance in them. Thank you, Mr. Videmšek. In this way, we have actually summarized what we initially said, that we don't need only the transformation of individuals, but the transformation of the society, and this transformation is urgent. So we have reached the end. I'll give the floor to Zvonka. Thank you all who have been with us. Thank you, Boštjan. I think there isn't much to be added after everything Boštjan said. Thank you once again. I would like to thank you and Matjaž, because you go there where people don't like to go, such as the Tilos Island, and you offer solutions and actually create this big story of green transformation. And thank you for reminding us that we are not gods, but ordinary people. And we have also heard that all the answers lie with human beings, not with the animals, and that we should listen to each other. So let's conclude this EPOE forum from the view who takes a broader perspective. So we have all the NGOs here with a broader perspective, but I think we have learned a lot from Boštjan, and we need to seek answers to the question why something is happening to us. So this event, I think, has been excellent, and everything that has taken place here will be available on the website of this forum. We will appreciate any feedback from you, and will send a letter to all the participants, including a questionnaire to be filled in, so that we get the feedback as regards the preparation of other events about the aging population and the future of work. We talk now about sustainable work, and this has been mentioned at a recent conference organized by the Ministry of Labor. So we have also technical support at all our fora. So another call mentioned by Patricia. So all professionals involved in adult learning are ready, together with all the partners, to move things, to improve things, but this shouldn't only be projects, but this should be our daily effort. Thank you very much. Patricia, maybe you want to say something similar. Thank you from our part. I would like to thank all the speakers for taking your time, and despite the Zoom platform, you have been with us until the end, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Hvala.
Enako, vse dobro.
Hvala, srečno.
Srečno. Hvala tudi za vse prispevke v klepetalnici.
Bravo.